Edward Snowden cannot come back to the United States and live here. You should be angry that he is not welcome here in the United States because even though he exposed mass surveillance that was being conducted by the National Security Agency in concert with other agencies in partnership with European agencies that was directed and hoovering up the communications records of millions of citizens, not just in the United States, but the entire globe, systematically violating their privacy rights, even though he exposed that and gave us a greater understanding of how these systems operate, how they are targeted against us. He cannot come home and live in the United States without being subject to an Espionage Act trial in which he could potentially go to prison for decades if he is convicted. I mean, we don't know. This is highly sensitive. We're talking about communications intelligence in some cases that can't even be discussed in open court. He would have no opportunity for a public interest defense if put on trial. And this has been discussed over and over again. So people who are apoplectic that he now has Russia's citizenship today, don't let them forget the fact that they know very well the reason why he is going to live as a Russia citizen in the in Russia is because his country has insisted. This started in 2013. Nearly a decade later, they've insisted on continuing to pursue his prosecution despite what it has done to improve our knowledge, despite the reforms that have been spurred, despite all of the positives that can be referenced by civil liberties organizations, and even members of Congress who passed something called the USA Freedom Act because they were spurred to action from the disclosures. The disclosures that were the subject of Pulitzer Prize winning journalism that was done by Glenn Greenwald, Laura Poitras, Ewan McCaskill. And then there were other reporters as well, I believe, who shared in that Pulitzer Prize. And that reporting is why we know what we know today. It uh, led to a surge in interest in encryption and privacy tools for people to use, for consumers to use. And it even became part of Apple's branding. They now sell privacy to people, but they weren't doing that before Edward Snowden stepped forward. And yet, now he is going to be treated as if this is confirmation that he has been a spy for Russia all along, when in fact, people should know that he was trapped in Russia because the State Department revoked his passport when he was fleeing Hong Kong, when he was on that flight, when he came and he was transiting through the airport in Moscow, and he was hoping to go on another flight and head to a country, head to Ecuador. His final destination was not Russia. His final destination was not Moscow. He did not intend to become a Russian citizen. He intended to be living somewhere else, and at best, he hoped that he could come back home after negotiating with the Justice Department and find a resolution so that he could stay a U.S. citizen who was contributing to the security and well-being of all of us by informing us of the ways that the NSA was violating our privacy. He believed he was helping us to protect ourselves. So this news says that he applied. He said he was applying in 2020. He described the decision as a practical measure to give his family greater freedom crossing borders. His request was granted by Putin in a decree that was dated on Monday. It was published. He's among dozens of foreigners granted citizenship in the decree. So this wasn't just solely singling out Putin as if to poke the eye of the United States government. Being treated like a kind of tit for a tat within the context of the war in Ukraine, but it seems like it could probably have happened regardless of whether there was this conflict that has shaken the entire globe for this past year.